morning, everyone. Welcome to today's discussion. For those who haven't seen my face yet this week, my name's Angela Tyrrell. I'm part of the LSX team, and I'm really excited to be with you for this morning's discussion. We have a topic that is very close to my heart. We're going to be exploring leading the way, but still work to be done: diversity and gender balance in the Nordic life sciences ecosystem. I love this topic because I think so often we take a negative approach when we're in this space. And I'm really looking forward to looking at some of the things that are being done really well in the Nordic region. Now, Nana Soni, who was from Coulter Partners, who was going to moderate this morning, has unfortunately been struck down with a lost voice. So her colleague Ian has bravely agreed to step in. He's going to do a wonderful job for you this morning. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you, Ian. Please take it away.
Thanks, Angela, and a very poor substitute, I promise you, those of you who know Nana. Thank you everyone for joining. I'd love to really start with two things, which is making progress in this space of diversity, equity and inclusion really relies on, one, asking great questions, and two, sharing your experiences. And so with that, I'd love to turn over to our incredible and diverse panel, who are going to introduce themselves, but also share a little bit around their own experience of diversity and inclusion. So Inka, if I may, I'll start with you. Oh, I think we may have lost Inka. Let's go around the clock then. So Petrina, you're next on my screen.
Sure. Hi everyone, I'm Petrina. I'm head of people and organization in Novo Holdings and in the Novo Nordics Foundation. I have a background as a psychologist, and this combined with 17 years of experience in various international organizations. I have worked primarily within corporate settings. I have worked in large telecom, TDC, AP Møller Mærsk, Carlsberg, and Danske Bank. And during the past 2.5 years, I have been working for Novo Holdings and the Novo Nordics Foundation. Throughout my career, and of course being a part of HR, I have naturally worked with diversity and inclusion as a core focus. And some of the challenges I have experienced working with this topic is of course related to various aspects, as for example, attracting and finding the right talent for the right job. Also addressing unconscious bias, both in the process of recruitment, but also in general in the organization. And lastly, creating inclusive culture where you actually benefit from these diverse teams, and also ensure that you retain the talents that you have. So these are some of the challenges I hope we can discuss in this panel, and I really look forward to discuss this with all of you.
Thank you. Inka, I think we've got you back. I think we lost you at a key point.
Yeah, and sorry for that. Everything froze the moment you said my name, so let's hope it's not a sign of anything. So Petrina gave a fantastic introduction. My name is Inka Mero. I'm the managing partner and founder of Hayden Ventures. We're one of the first true deep tech funds in the Nordics and Baltics, meaning that we actually invest into science-originated or science-connected deep tech companies with a mission to solve big global problems. So we look into startups and growth companies aiming to solve climate, health, resource scarcity, and so forth. My background is 25 years in technology-related businesses. So I've been a founder in several companies, actually 7 companies. I've been a CEO, I've been heading product, global sales and marketing, and always a bit of this, female frog in the room. So probably a bit of ahead of my time in a sense that even working in public boards as a very young female executive. Now, as I'm middle-aged, I'm not the youngest one anymore in the room, which is great. But I feel a strong passion for the topic due to several things. Firstly, we're missing still the role models in the industry. Secondly, when it comes to digital marketing, B2C, we see much more diversity than what we see in deep tech and in life sciences. And thirdly, we need to see that female-founded teams can also grasp the huge value growth that is now happening in the market in terms of a growth capital whether it's venture capital or IPOs or whatsoever. So there are so many angles we can take to the gender diversity and the diversity in general in the Nordics. So very much looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Inka. Roger, I may come to you next.
Sure. So hi, I'm Roger Frank. I'm a partner at Hayden Ventures, which is a Nordic-based life science venture capital firm. I'm personally based in the Stockholm office, but we're headquartered in Oslo in Norway. From a diversity perspective, it's something we're very interested in Hayden. We have a female founder, and we have a 40% female investment team, which I think is significantly above the industry average. And I think it's a really important agenda from a societal perspective, also from a returns perspective. There's plenty of evidence that firms that have a balanced and diverse team, achieve superior returns, and I think also portfolio companies which have that as well have an opportunity to drive superior performance. So it's something we're super focused on, and look forward to talking about it more on this panel.
Thank you, Roger. And Jenny?
Yes, hi, my name is Jenny Norborg, and I'm a governmental official. A little bit the odd person out in this room currently, but and my role is working as a national life sciences coordinator. But my background is in engineering, and I have a PhD in laser technology, and I built up a medical tech company many years ago. But I do have the own experience of being sort of one of a handful females around the globe in my field and area when it came to business. And I think that is, Ian, you opened up with sort of asking the clever questions. And I don't have a clever questions, but for the whole panel and the audience, my question is really, what do you need from also from the structural benefits from the official side in order to make changes? Because life sciences is really a sector where we have a very good gender balance when it comes to the whole panel, but not in a startup or in the growth business or in that sense. But when it comes to the public sector, of course, we have a great challenge when it comes to diversity. So, and I always get a lot of suggestions or polls really from when it comes to the medical personnel, to the training in the public sector, what is needed, what needs to be done. But the business sector is very silent. So that's really simple question is what needs to be done and how can the public sector also support that? Thank you.
Great. I think it's a huge part. Thank you, Jenny. And finally, just a few words about Course Partners. As the chair, we are 100 people globally dedicated to building brilliant, diverse teams for life sciences and digital health companies. And a tiny bit about me, because I was meant to be Nana. I'm a computer scientist by training, failed at that, and then went into professional services and have been in executive search for about 10 years now, primarily working with early stage digital businesses. And to Inka's point, we view diversity very broadly. So it is around gender, it is around ethnicity, but actually when you have really, really shallow talent pools in AI, in B2C, and in areas of life sciences where things are not mature, actually we have to bring other sectors into life sciences. And that's where diversity is also about experience, education, background, and upbringing. So I think a great place to start is always some data. And so I'd love to turn over to Roger to share a little bit about one of your studies, Roger, which I think brings home why this is such a key topic.
Yeah, sure, happy to do so. So let me share my screen. If I can't do that at this stage in the pandemic, I guess we have a problem, but okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. So yeah, first I just thought I'd briefly introduce Hayden Ventures before I get on to the data that I plan to present around diversity. So as an introduction, we're a life science specialist VC. We're based in Oslo and Stockholm. We recently made a final investment out of our first fund, which was an 85 million euro fund, which is out of institutional and private investors, mostly in the Nordics. We have an ESG focused agenda, and I think we're uniquely kind of diverse, which, as I mentioned, I think helps us with our investment activities. And the core thesis of the fund is really around leveraging untapped investment opportunities in the less ventured regions of Europe. So that's why we have a particular focus on the Nordic region and also the DACH region. We have a very experienced team across life sciences with a strong track record of performance, and I'm pleased to say we'll shortly be launching our second fund with a similar strategy. But moving on to the topic at hand, diversity. I think we have a strong focus on diversity at Hayden, as I mentioned, and I think for two reasons. Firstly, it's the right thing to do, but secondly, it's the right thing to do from a business perspective. And if you look at the investment industry or the venture capital industry, it is very weak from a diversity perspective. So I think a recent Harvard Business Review study showed that just 8% of VC investors on the investment professional side are women. And I think apart from the societal impact, I think lack of diversity, there's good evidence that it impacts performance and returns. And I think the similar study looked at the impact of having more diverse teams, and one example of the data coming out of that was that adding 10% of female VC partners led on average to a 1.5% increase in overall annual fund returns. So a very significant impact of having more diverse teams. And of course, the other aspect is that I think gender diversity is just one part of the equation, and lack of other forms of diversity is also a negative impact on returns. So that's kind of our perspective. But then in terms of what we actually do about it, I think firstly we try to lead by example. So as I mentioned, we have a female founder and managing partner. We have 4 out of 10 of our investment team are women. And beyond that, we also focus quite a lot on measurement. So we document diversity in our own team, obviously, but we also monitor it carefully within both the pipeline companies that we're looking at as potential investments, and also within our portfolio companies. And we do that on an ongoing basis. And we also look to kind of acknowledge and tackle bias. So I think, as everybody recognizes, understanding your own bias helps you to tackle it. And we also actively seek out investment opportunities with diverse teams, which I think is an important aspect. And then the fourth thing is, we look to build and participate in networks. So networks like Level 20, for example, where we were a founding member of that in the Nordic region. We have a project shortly to launch around a women's health generator, which basically is around ensuring sharing of opportunities in the women's health therapeutic area among VCs. I think that's has often been a neglected area. And so I think we're looking to address the kind of what I would call the kind of 3 levels of the diversity challenge in the industry. Kind of the first level being lack of diversity within venture funds themselves. The second being lack of diversity within the portfolio companies and pipeline companies that the industry invests in. And then finally, the lack of a diverse perspective when it comes to the end therapeutic areas that companies are in the sector are tackling. So, for example, the well-known, absence of investment and focus on diseases that specifically affect women, like, for example, endometriosis. So we look to deal with all of these aspects in the way we look at diversity. And as part of this effort, today's presentation covers, I guess, the monitoring aspect or the measuring aspect that I mentioned. In terms of a report that we've compiled, which we intend to do each year, tracking diversity in our pipeline and portfolio companies. So I think the first thing to say, based on the data coming out of this, is there's a long way to go overall. So when we look across all companies in the Hayden pipeline, which is mostly European companies, 85% had a male CEO, 40% had all male management teams, and another 35% had majority male management teams. So only 18% were gender balanced, and that's overall across, as I said, mostly Europe. So clearly there's a very long way to go in terms of the size of the challenge. I think there's also evidence that leadership affects the diversity of teams. So when we looked at what were the composition of teams in companies with male CEOs versus companies with female CEOs, we see that companies with male CEOs tend to have male-dominated teams. So 82% male teams, whereas companies with female CEOs have more diverse teams. So I think it shows the importance of the CEO role in terms of driving diversity through organizations. I think there's obviously a variance in terms of countries, but all clearly have work to do. So when we look at the proportion, one metric being the proportion of female CEOs, there are some notable top performers: Israel, Switzerland, Sweden at the top, but there are also some countries that are performing very poorly on this metric. I think perhaps surprisingly, if you look at the Nordic region as a whole, the proportion of female CEOs is only about average, but that masks a significant split between Sweden, which is the most diverse, and also Norway on the one hand, and then Finland and Denmark, which fall well below the average. And as I mentioned, the best performers were Israel and Switzerland, but all countries are way below 50%. If you look at management teams, we see a similar trend. So only 22% on average of management teams are female. And in terms of when you look at the split by country, you see a similar pattern: Sweden and Norway performing strongly, and less strong performance in the Nordic region from for example, Denmark and Finland. But the average still heavily skewed towards either all male or majority male management teams. So the other thing we measured, apart from all the companies in our pipeline, which I guess is a very large set of companies, which are probably quite representative companies overall in Europe. If we look specifically at our portfolio, are we succeeding in terms of driving diversity in our investment decisions? And I think when you look at that, yes, to some degree we are. So in terms of proportion of women on each management team, our portfolio has about 25% versus 23% in the overall set. And when you look at boards, it's 25% versus 16%. But of course, our teams are still far below an even split. And at the CEO level, we achieve around an average performance of about 15% of the companies with a female CEO. I would say that we also monitor diversity through our holding period. And we're pleased to see that there's progression in terms of diversity as our influence is kind of brought to bear through the holding period. So just to kind of conclude on what we find in the survey, I think as an investor, we're looking to definitely strive to be as diverse as possible, despite the highly unequal industry landscape. And the starting point is maintaining an approximate gender balance within our investment team. And we're also focused on driving other forms of diversity. And I think it's really key to business performance, which is why we're so focused on monitoring it and making sure we understand how we're performing. And so I think the key point is that diversity is most likely to be achieved when it's central to the business mission and you position it as central to everything you do, and also when it's monitored so everybody can see the facts. So I hope I've presented some of those facts now, but yeah, I'll hand it back to you now.
Good. So panel, any reflections on, I mean, there's positives and then sometimes sort of seeing a 15% CEO, which I think is very representative of life sciences ecosystem. Any sort of reactions to what Roger's presented?
So maybe just a quick comment from Voima Ventures' point of view. I think firstly, it's great to see that Hayden has also measured the pipeline, because the pipeline really tells the state of the ecosystem. To put you in these numbers into context, we review roughly 3,000 cases on a yearly basis, and more detailed maybe 1,000. And we've now invested into 15 from our new fund portfolio. Obviously, we have already 17. Now we've measured ESG and the similar numbers in our own portfolio, and the ratio is very similar. So mixed team ratio roughly 25%. The number of CEOs lower than Hayden's, so it's roughly 12%. And the boards are also roughly 25%. And that was one of the reasons, for example, we took the decision that we will very actively drive the board composition, because clearly one of the discrepancies we see is, in addition to the fact that in the founder teams, you don't have enough diversity a bit by gender, the boards don't have the networks to the female leaders. So this is an area where we started to work with. But I echo the numbers very similar to ours in all retrospect.
And same here. I can also both recognize the numbers and the conclusions, even though I think you're doing better, a little bit better, especially on the CEO part, Hayden, that what we are currently doing. I was just reflecting a little bit on exactly that, on board composition, because that is also something we really work on, having targets on this and doing a lot of effort in recruiting a diverse set of talents when we have a chance to impact. But then I thought, impacting the nominations committee in these boards. So we also have a diversity in the nomination committee. That is also something that you need to consider when building the boards. I think it's a great report. I'm of course a little embarrassed being a Dane and being based in Denmark, but unfortunately those numbers are also replicated in the recent report from the World Economic Forum on the gender gap. And in Denmark, we are extremely good at educating females, so we are actually #1 in that report, but unfortunately that does not show in the numbers when it comes to political leadership, when it comes to leadership in the private sector and all other aspects. So there's definitely more work to do in the Nordics.
And if I can also just comment a little bit from a policy perspective, it's really great to have this data. It would be even greater if it could be sort of common amongst investors. If we could sort of put all the data side by side, and because then in only a few years we'll also have the longitudinal trends to see. Because we think that we know that we are on a good track, but we need to see that, and that's also something that I think that the Office for Life Sciences or the government offices can support all throughout the Nordics within life sciences. But so it's great to have, and it's also very interesting, both Petrina and Inka, to hear of your work on board management level, and I think that is something that a policy discussion would also very much welcome to, if we could have that interaction.
Can I just ask you one question, Roger? Is this the first time that you're doing this report, or do you report on this on an ongoing basis?
Yeah, we plan to do it on an ongoing basis. This was the first report that we, in this format, that we did. But we monitor those in terms of publicly published report, but we monitor this internally, every year.
Okay, good. Because I think just having this report, creating the data, showing this will create awareness and a call for action, and then change will happen. So I think it's really good that you do this. Yeah,
transparency is brilliant. And again, I'd love to hear back from the panel. So it's somewhat a very English phrase, the chicken or egg. Which would you say is more important, the diversity of your teams that are making the investments, or the diversity of the pipeline and investments you're making? And I know they're not separate. So, but what would you say if you had to pick one and you had a magic wand, had to pick one, which would it be?
I would pick actually the whole venture industry. It's the least diverse industry, hundreds of billions globally, but only 2% of that money is managed by funds founded by women or women as managing partners. So it all starts from the fact that we have institutional players like pension funds or family offices who need to say that diversity matters in venture capital as an asset class, and that will have a ball rolling effect. At the same time, we need to also bear in mind that building these venture funds and becoming a venture capitalist and building a fund, it requires a really, really long track record. And often in this respect, there's just you can't, you know, bypass the time in a sense. Obviously, women need to build their careers, and we need to make that available for everyone. The other angle is obviously lowering the entry barrier to the venture capital industry. So what we've done in the Voima Ventures from the very beginning, we started a trainee program. So we recruit talented women from the universities who are interested in venture capital, deep tech, and also startups. And basically, these ladies rotate with us between, you know, half a year to 2 years, and hopefully they figure out that actually, you know, becoming an entrepreneur is a great choice, or even later, you know, becoming a investor. So you need actions in multiple levels, and of course in the founder space as well. However, this big systemic challenge really lies in, like, you know, where the funding comes to VCs and what kind of the VC teams really are about. And we need to act upon on that. And like Hayden has showed the way, for example, ourselves, you know, really building that partnership, but also having LPs to believe that actually female VC teams can perform well enough.
I don't disagree. So very much in alignment with Inka.
Yeah, I would agree as well. I think it's, I mean, you in a way, you start where the problem is the most acute, and that's within the investment arena. Because I mean, as we said, I think 9%, only 9% of VC partners are women. So that's actually, you know, that's below even what we see in the the target companies for investment.
Some leading countries in this respect, if we have also this misconception that Nordics is very equal, but in reality, for example, UK and Ireland, they lead much better in the diversity in terms of a funding, you know, whether it's investment managers or associates or partners or members in the investment committee. So their average numbers vary between 16 to 32% of the total capital, again, like managed, or then the relative number of the team members. And one big implicator there has been that there was a policy making initiative which was focusing around this. It was around female entrepreneurship, but also female funding program. And let's not dwell in the details on it, but I think policymakers here can have an influence on kind of making the ball to roll.
And of course, here we are focusing a lot on gender, but we need to take the other factors into account as well. And in general, I think actually the company should represent the culture they're in and the country they're in. So having a look at how the diversity looks there, both when it comes to ethnicity and gender and other aspects.
Yeah. And I think, Inka, you talked about sort of starting at the graduate level or the university level, but any insight from any of you in terms of moving the needle at the senior level? Because you're right that there's going to be a lead time, but you know, are there ways of improving that or accelerating that at the senior level?
You mean in the venture funds?
In the venture funds.
Yeah. So yes, look, I think we've seen an era that new kinds of venture funds are arising. They're very much climate driven, purpose driven, and also have different ways of operating models. So it's not that single model anymore, that where you have a group of all white men, male panel partnership, and then associates working under the pyramid. You have accelerator models, you have specialist models, you have the models where VCs even make SPACs to take companies public, or top-up models and whatsoever. So these typically, I think we see now this extrapolated development of technology, which requires industry expertise. So I actually believe that many of that expertise can come from the field of energy industry. So there you have a lot of executive senior talent who can come on board to VC funds, or in optics or photonics or consumer electronics and so forth. So specialty funds, I think, are one way of doing that. And then let's face it, you don't have to be a Elon Musk to found a venture fund. You need to have a good sense of entrepreneurship. So I think we actually now have these super talented 30 plus generation of women leaders who've been already in growth companies, in unicorns like Spotify or Klarna and so forth. And there was an interesting study from Danske Group just recently that this 1.6 billion of clean tech funding that has gone to the Nordics now, many of the founders actually come from these fintech or e-com or digital unicorns. So they're not the core founders, but they're the kind of the next layer. And there we see a lot of women, which I think is now also what we will see in the VC world as well. So new team members joining on board, maybe entrepreneurs as residents, maybe as venture partners, but it's now accelerating, to my opinion.
I guess, again, bring some of the questions from the audience. Jenny, if I don't mind turning to you, we've seen the differences across different parts of the Nordics. So, what Sweden and Norway are doing well. Is there anything that you think countries can learn from each other, whether it's around quotas, whether it's around kind of any other areas of sort of strategic innovation or policy?
Of course, there's very much that we need to learn also between countries and between the different ways of working. I think that a lot that has been discussed by the panel today would be great to really set targets on a national level to see, even if that does not come with specific measures, because specific measures can be problematic, but setting a target and having sort of a clear goal that we want to keep on track with the Nordics and work on diversity as a whole. I think that would be great. In biotech and medicine, I mean, we have a very good gender representation, but when you dig down not only into venture capital, but also into academic capital, where the really great funding goes, where the really large sums goes, that is not balanced. And that's why you have sort of the board level position. That's why that could be a key going into sort of why we have fewer female entrepreneurs really on when we're talking about life sciences or biotech. And I think that if we could have sort of a joint goal there between sort of top academia with top venture capital, I think that would be really fertilizing to the discussion, because this is about trust and about having trust in the health and the public sector as a whole. We are moving more into data-driven life sciences, and their diversity is really fundamental in maintaining the trust that everything that we do and every data that we collect and everybody that contributes to that needs to be a pan population. And that's from a public perspective, that's a true challenge, because we won't do investments if we can't really secure the balance. But we won't secure the balance if we don't do investments in the infrastructure, in the data infrastructure. That's a big challenge in my field of work.
Yeah, I think it's. I was going to say, I think it's a good point about the balance in academia, because obviously, when particularly for the types of companies that we look at, most of the founders are, principal investigators in scientific groups, and that's an area where the imbalance is, as you say, although overall it looks fairly balanced, at the senior levels it's very imbalanced. And I think part of that relates to the structure of a scientific career, and the way that interacts with, for example, public policy on parental leave and so on, creates a large bias in terms of the numbers at the top. And until that's addressed, it's going to be fishing in a pool where you start with, majority male group in terms of, senior scientists. So that's definitely, I think that's definitely a challenge. I think also on the public policy side, it's maybe some of the issues around board composition, like our numbers suggested with the CEO position is key to driving diversity through an organization. Also the board is key to that. So maybe some of the differences that you see, for example, between Sweden, Norway and the other Nordic countries, it kind of relates to the public policy around those topics.
And in Norway, they do have quotas. And of course, we were all looking at Norway and what would happen to the quality of the boards there implementing quotas. And what we saw in Norway was that they just found more qualified women for these boards. Of course, there are variances to the story, but a big research project from CBS actually has shed light to this. I must admit, in general, I'm not very much in favor of having too many rules or policies on the topics, because it creates a lot of bureaucracy, and ultimately it can lead to the wrong decisions on people, and that can be destructive, actually, also for diversity and inclusion. But I do agree with you, Jenny, that having KPIs, not necessarily tied into remuneration, but having KPIs also helps driving a constant focus on this.
And I'd love, so again, one of the questions from the audience is around the differences. So Roger, your data reflected that, female CEOs led to more gender balanced teams, and also having a female founder in your own organization. Is there anything you see in terms of behaviors? I mean, I guess the question is why? So why do female CEOs drive more diverse teams?
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard question to answer, obviously, but I think it's more. I don't think it's specific to whether you have the fact that the founder or the fact that the CEO is female. I think it's just about having, if you have a diverse organization in multiple ways across gender and also across other metrics, then by having that diverse kind of culture and organization, it makes it easier both on the pull and the push factors to also hire in a diverse way. So I think that's the, at the end of the day, all I have is the data, right? So it's just anecdotal, but I don't think that it's that there's a conscious, we have a female CEO, so we're going to hire more women. I think it's more that it just creates a diverse environment where there's a diverse hiring policy and there's a diverse culture. So I think that's what it's about, if I had to guess.
Yeah, and maybe to continue on that, data really shows obviously that diverse teams tend to perform better. It might be obviously due to multiple reasons, but of course, if you all come from the same background and with the same education and same kind of a thinking, you're more unlikely to be more innovative than your peer who is, say, more diverse. However, there is multiple aspects to this diversity. There's obviously the gender, but then the age, experience, then of course, let's say whether it's technical / commercial, growth driven, and so forth and so forth. So I think in terms of a deep tech company performance, what we see is that diversity obviously has to mean all of these factors, not having only a scientist team, rather have people who have built products, not only to kind of a focus to your comfort zone in the lab, rather build a functioning company, going globally directly to the customers and so forth. But on this board topic, data also shows that there's a lot of willingness. We did a survey among our boards and talked to many of the people. There was a lot of willingness, but the question was like, so where do we find these people? So what we did, we did a reach out to social media. We published our board diversity metrics and said, like, if you are an experienced female executive with CEO experience, of growth company experience, you've led a product, you're very good in science in certain area, please, share us with your CV, tell us that you're interested. We'll start, matching this. On top of that, we did a own direct search. We listed the top 100 most experienced people to our knowledge from the Finnish community. And then we just, did something. We created this Women to Boards event, which was similar to this one. We started by talking to people why diversity matters. We had people from EQT and leading funds talking about why actually they look into these metrics. So all the CEOs and chairmen, they really got the message. And then there were one-on-one sessions, and many of these have now gone through, and the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. And it was just required a lot of this handwork, a bit, let's say, headhunting work from us. But that's what we as VCs do anyway. We try to build and support our CEOs to build the best teams. So sometimes it's also about action and bringing the right people together. And here Nordics is really well positioned. We have fantastically functioning growth startup community. Now we just need to get the talent to life sciences and deep tech startups all together.
If I can just add also to shed light on the question on why female CEOs also attract more diverse teams. I think many of the candidates that are young females having a diverse background in some way, they also look at the top team and say, okay, is this a team I want to work for? And if it's a team that is completely alike, they of course consider, will I have the impact in this organization? And then they will not go to that organization. So of course, having a diverse team create more diversity as well, also when it comes to attracting talent.
Good. I think as we're almost pushing at time, but the final question came in, and it was for me, but I'll actually put it back to the panel after sort of a brief intro, which is what is the role of executive search in driving this? Because we partner very closely with founders, with funds. I think I would liken it to, so most early stage businesses we work with will probably, on a good growth journey, hire maybe 2 C-suite leaders a year. So it's not something that I think they're experts in their disease area or their digital therapeutic area, but they're not experts in hiring. And any one of our team will, finish 20 to 25 hires per year. So I think I would say, imagine executive search, people like architects really with there to advise, to help you understand the landscape. So, but also to challenge, because a lot of times we get asked to find a leader with 10 to 15 years experience, have taken a product through certain clinical phases. And each of those, if they are, hardwired into the job spec, will reduce diversity of the candidate pool. And so it's our job really to challenge and say, why is that so necessary? Because if you can live with 5 years of experience in that, actually the talent pool widens significantly. And I think the other thing is that we bring talent from other sectors. We've seen in digital health, the marketing, the product roles, they're not mature enough there's not enough digital health companies to start picking and choosing talent. Whereas, Spotify, Deliveroo, Klarna, Delivery Hero, you name them, have got talent galore when it comes to direct consumer marketing products. So really it's about being, you'll probably use an architect maybe once or twice in your life, hopefully more often with executive search people, but it's really to be advisors rather than transactors, to put 8 out of 10 men in front of you whenever you have a CSO role. But anyone on the panel, in terms of your experience, what else do you think executive search firms could or should be doing?
First of all, I think it's very valuable to work with search firms when you are building a diverse team, because you cannot, as a CEO, trust your own network, because you tend to surround yourself with people that looks like yourself or reminds you of yourself. I think, well, I have a different perspective, because working with search firms, of course, they can broaden up the perspective, challenge us, but we also need to challenge the search firms, because I think there's a big bias as well working with search firms, and that is also why I work actually on targets for the search firms, so targets on long lists, short lists, and all of that. But and I often challenge the search firms when the candidates are presented, because often the males are presented as wonder candidates qualifying for all requirements for a position, but when the females are presented, they are often presented with a but she lacks, but she doesn't have the executive presence, but she. So I'm actually spending a lot of time in coaching the search firms, being non-biased. But of course, it would be nice if it was the other way around, that I was being challenged on my own bias, because I also have bias. We all do when we are looking for diverse talents.
I think just Angela's given us a nudge. Any comment on we hear this a lot, the idea that women have to fake it until you make it? I know it's a provocative phrase, but I mean, is that still true in the industry, do you think? And would love any sort of honest perspectives.
In startups or the venture industry itself?
I think I'm just looking at the question. So I think it's in startups.
Startups, yeah. I mean, it's obviously the job of a VC to make sure that we don't fall for BS, right? So I guess that's should be a key part of diligence. So anyone faking it hopefully won't make it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree. And then maybe on an angle to this, obviously all male teams tend to raise more than 3x funding to the amount of female founder teams or female-led teams. So here there is a bit of a bias, and not even a bit, something systematically, okay, let's give her a chance or them a chance, but a little bit less risk and so forth. Yet female-led teams tend to perform better, as we know. Then another angle here is that on this bias, I feel that I'm biased as well. I remember doing our first trainee search, and we got 300 applicants and 2 women candidates. So this is not an easily approachable industry. There's a lot of networks that are very traditionally are certain way driven, and we need to break that. And one of the good ways of breaking that is like events like this, and just systematically gathering the talent with the CEOs or the chairmen or the teams to even within the universities and within academia when they're considering the tech transfer or the spin-offs altogether. I had a huge passion to find a full female founder team, and finally we've made our first investments. But let's face it, it was our 15th investment that we made. It's not that I didn't want, but there were so little alternatives. And as a VC, you obviously need to have a big funnel. So coming back to Roger's first presentation, growing that funnel is only possible if we do the groundwork in all levels.
And speaking about the groundwork, it is hard work, and it requires a constant focus to create diverse teams. It's not, you don't have a silver bullet. You need to work on all aspects in the organization. You need to work on, your processes for recruitment, the nomination committees. You need to work on your culture, inclusive culture, so you can retain the talent. You need to make organizational sanity checks, so you don't have unjustified pay gaps, so you don't have other biases in your process and system. So it is a huge work, but it pays off also in the results in the end.
Good. I think that's a perfect way to wrap up. So panel, thank you for your honest and provocative feedback. And Angela, to you.
And of course, thank you, Ian, for a wonderful discussion. As always, those 45 minutes have absolutely flown. I could have listened to you all for hours. But thank you once again to Ian and our panel for the excellent discussion. Thank you so much to our audience for being so engaged and interactive and asking so many questions. It's really wonderful to hear from you. Very quickly, anyone who's watching who hasn't yet had a look at our LSX Female Founders Network, we'd love to have you there. I'll put a link in the chat after the discussion's finished, so do look us up. We'd love to host you there. We have a wonderful group of women who are really inspiring, and we love getting together every month or so for conversations, so love to host you there. But in the meantime, I will let you all get on with your next session. Thank you so much once again to our panel. Thank you all for watching, and goodbye.